Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to step away from the Marvels and it's time to talk about Rachel Zegler because, as you guys are aware, The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes has officially come out now, and apparently it's receiving the worst critic scores ever for the entire franchise of The Hunger Games. Now, the reason why this is noteworthy is because, quite frankly, Rachel Zegler is probably one of the most hated women on the internet when it comes to Hollywood. It's very clear that she has her own personal agendas when she takes over certain roles for movies, and people just don't like it. People are honestly fed up with the nonsense that she talks about. And ever since the strike has ended and she's been allowed to promote her own thing, because listen, the actor strike is still going on. The writer strike has ended, but they allowed her to promote this movie. They allowed her to take part in interviews. They allowed her to take part in social media and promote this movie. So she's been saying all the typical nonsense that she always says, and people are fed up. And now apparently the critics are even fed up as well, which to me is pretty shocking considering how much people try to shill for movies like this. So let's get into the article, guys, from Mounting Into Comics. But of course, before we do, if you are new here, just consider hitting that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it, and like the video to push this out into the YouTube algorithm. It says The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, starring Rachel Zegler, has received the worst critic scores of the entire Hunger Games franchise. The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songs and Snakes currently has a 60% tomato meter score from 85 reviews with an average score of 6.3 out of 10. It has 51 fresh reviews and 34 rotten reviews. Looking at the top critics, it has a rotten 46% with an average score of 5.9 out of 10 with 12 fresh and 14 rotten reviews. Now, you got to be fair and imagine that 60%, 50 to 60% is probably where this movie is going to fall, right? You can look at this movie and clearly see this is not going to be any real like sequel to the previous films, or even if it's a prequel, it doesn't matter. Like they can't follow up their previous successes at all. Like it's very clear that they have. That's why they remake everything. They remake everything because whenever they try to come up with something new, they just fail. They fail miserably, and they don't really have the creativity that they had before. That's because everything is so stifled through the identity politics that you really don't have the ability to be super creative. Unfortunately, every time you want to think of something, you have to think about, oh, does it check this box, that box? And before you know it, you really can't do what you want to do in the first place. So movies like this, they're never going to be as good as the originals. It's impossible. It says in comparison, The Hunger Games received an 84% tomato meter score from 318 reviews. It received a 7.3 out of 10 with 268 fresh reviews and 50 rotten reviews. It received a 7.3 out of 10 with 268 fresh reviews and 50 rotten reviews. The top critic scores clocked in at 82% with an average score of 7.2 out of 10 with 64 fresh and 14 rotten. Truth be told, people probably just like Jennifer Lawrence better. Or the fact of the matter is, this was the first movies that came out, so obviously these were the first movies to adapt the books. It's going to be more successful than movies that come out afterwards. That's just the name of the game. It has nothing to do with wokeness necessarily. It just has to do with placement in their line, right? So obviously this is what, the fourth movie, I would imagine, fourth or fifth movie, so it's not going to be nowhere near as successful as the first one was. That's just obvious. The Hunger Games: Catching Fire received a 90% tomato meter score with an average rating of 7.6 out of 10. It received 267 fresh reviews and 29 rotten reviews. The top critics gave it 89%. The average review was 7.5 out of 10. It had 68 fresh and 8 rotten reviews. Now, this is pretty massive, and this was before they started filtering reviews like they do now. Like, obviously, everybody knows Rotten Tomatoes is bought and paid for. It's pretty much official at this point, so anything that happens in modern day is pretty much up to debate. But back then, they really didn't have the proof about whether or not it was bought and paid for. Now, obviously, you can argue, of course, that would be the case. They would pay to get good reviews, right? What company wouldn't want to pay some reviewer to give a positive review for their product? Obviously, that's been going on forever, right? But the thing is, it wasn't proven in the public eye until recently, for the past year or two. So that's why now you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. It says The Hunger Games: Mockingjay Part 1 received 70%. The average was 6.3 out of 10 with 213 fresh and 93 rotten. The top critics gave it 66% with an average rating of 6.10 out of 10. It had 51 fresh and 26 rotten. And the list goes on and on, ladies and gentlemen, obviously. Now, my thing is, the whole reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want to have the discussion around Rachel Zegler and whether or not she actually had a major impact on whether or not this film was going to do good or not. Now, a lot of people were saying that this film is failing, at least in critical reception, due to the fact of Zegler being the main lead, and I don't really know if that's necessarily true. As much as I want to hate on Rachel Zegler and make fun of her because she deserves all of it, I think that only has to be a partial part of the overall picture regarding this movie. Now, obviously, her saying the things that she said, that's not great, right? Like, she is absolutely a detriment to this movie every time she speaks. She's a detriment to every movie that she stars in every time she speaks. And it's unfortunate that they let her keep speaking, right? Like, during the strike, when she was forced to be quiet, that was great. That was the best thing for her. But now, unfortunately, she's allowed to speak again, and now you just get a whole bunch of nonsense that comes out her mouth. But I think ultimately this movie is failing on many different avenues. Quite simply, it's not that great of a movie. Also, there is a slight bit of wokeness to it. Of course, there is diversity, equity, and inclusion nonsense that you have to deal with. Is it prominent? Not really, but is it there? Of course it is. And because of this, it is failing in the box office as well. It's not just critical reception. This movie is not doing very well in the box office currently. It says on top of these poor critic scores, the film is predicted to have the worst opening weekend in franchise history as well. Box Office Pro projects the film will only gross between 42 million and 55 million in its opening weekend. Specifically, they project the film would gross 47.1 million. The outlet previously indicated the film would gross between 97 and 157 in its entire domestic run. All four of the previous films had opening weekends above $102 million. While the film is doing worse on all metrics compared to other films in the franchise, it will likely fare better than the Marvels since its estimated production budget is only $100 million. Now, see, that's the smart way to go. And I've been saying this for a while. If you want to make these woke movies, right? If you want to make these girl boss movies, you need to lower the budgets. You should not be having $300 million budgets before marketing for a freaking movie like the Marvels. That is just stupid. Like, why would you spend that much money? You're insane. So $100 million is pretty much around the sweet spot, I would imagine, for a movie like this. So what it need to do, in my opinion, about 200 to break even, because it didn't really have a ton of marketing. But, you know, Bounding Into Comics likes to use a 2.5 model, so 250 million to break even to cover the film's box office split with the theaters and whatnot. You can kind of make up your own mind regarding that, but I still don't think that it's going to be necessarily that much in order to break even. But they're going to have to make quite a bit of money in order to break even, and right now it's not looking very good for them. But I will say that The Hunger Games was very successful internationally. With all the other films, international box office was huge for this particular movie. So I would be interested to see how good this movie does internationally and if it still has legs in those markets. If it does, that should save this movie, at least financially, and make it profitable. But of course, time is going to tell whether or not that ends up being true. And whether or not Rachel Zegler plays a big pivotal role in the downfall of this film, that also is going to take time to see. But she didn't really say too much that is going to neuter this film like she did with Snow White. So I really don't want to put the blame fully on her, as well as the overall picture is way more important. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.